So this story starts in May 1980, outside a Chicago suburb, and it was a classic May Midwestern day, right? It wasn't quite summer, it wasn't spring anymore, it was a little sticky in the air, and I was sent to junior high that morning with a note saying, please excuse Joe for a dentist appointment. His parents will pick him up at 11 o'clock. And I didn't know that there was a dentist appointment that day, so I went to school a little depressed, a little let down. And sure enough, 11 o'clock, I go out front, there's my parents, they pick me up. My little brother's in the car though, too, which I find unusual. And I look at him and he looks at me and I ask him, like, dentist appointment? He's like, yeah. And we start driving. My parents are unusually quiet. Now, from where I'm sitting, I can see my father in the driver's seat, and I can see that my father's crow's feet are activated. And here's what I can tell you as a little kid. If I could see my father's crow's feet when he was driving, that meant he was smiling. And if he was smiling, he was in a good mood. And if he was in a good mood because I was going to a dentist appointment, well, that made me mad. But I couldn't figure it out. And my mother just kept turning around and looking at my brother and I and smiling. And that was very uncharacteristic of my mother, because my mother was not a happy woman. So my brother and I are looking at each other like there's something is up. Something is going on. And as we're going down these leafy streets in the suburbs and we finally turn onto a freeway, I start realizing we're not going towards the dentist we normally go to. And my mom turns around and says, boys, you're not going to the dentist today. Instead, your father and I are taking you to the opening of The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, that was epic, okay? Epic. As a little kid in the Midwest, Star Wars was my life. And my little brother and I, we lost our shit. Like, we were just bouncing off the thing. My dad's crow's feet, I've never seen them deeper, okay? He is laughing, my mother is smiling. It's like, oh my God, this is such a happy moment. And you have to understand, this was not just parents taking the kids to see the movie they couldn't wait to see. My mother and I had been locked in a spiritual Cold War since Star Wars had come out. My mother had been a nun, a Roman Catholic habit-wearing nun for 10 years, and she decided before she took the final vows that wasn't really her thing, but she still held on to an immense amount of guilt, so much guilt that she adopted 2 boys and raised them to become priests. And I know I'm talking fast, but I'm trying to cover a lot of ground. You guys gotta keep up, okay? But here was the thing. Once Star Wars came out, I knew I didn't want to be a priest, okay? And my mother knew that she was losing me, and there was no, you can't compete with warrior monks and glowing swords and the Force and spaceships and Chewbacca and all of it, right? My mother was losing me to Star Wars. And to me, as a kid growing up lonely in the Midwest in the 70s, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, Star Wars was the first hint of a larger world. When Luke Skywalker said, I want to go with you and learn the ways of the Force, I identified with that, man. You know, I craved excitement and meaning, just like he did. He didn't know who his real father was. I was adopted. Luke Skywalker was growing up in a hole in the desert ground. I was being raised in Illinois. We had a lot in common. But my mother, in her typical way, couldn't just make the case that maybe Christianity could be just as exciting as Star Wars and the Force. No, she had to come at it from a passive-aggressive way. Right? And this is how she finally started to dent my little kid logic. One day, after like the 20th time my brother and I had come home from seeing the movie, right? She goes, it's too bad that, you know, Luke lost faith at the end. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you know, that scene where they're flying down, you know, the big star killer, Death Star, whatever. They're flying down the trench, and he hears the words of what was it? Obi-Wan Kenobi. She's doing this on purpose, too, to get under my skin. She knows the names, right? But this is where she focuses in, and she goes, you know, he hears Obi-Wan tell him, use the Force, and what does Luke do? He just taps his helmet and goes, must be a problem. She was right. That's exactly what happened in the movie, right? At that critical moment, when Luke is piloting the lone X-Wing down the trench of the Death Star, Darth Vader's behind him. We don't know what's going to happen. The rebel base is about to be blowing up. And Obi-Wan Kenobi tells him, trust the Force, Luke. And Luke just goes, like there's a glitch, right? And now I look back at it as an adult, I'm like, yeah, like the ground control was fucking with him one more time, you know? Like, yeah, just pretend to be Obi-Wan, that'll mess with him. No, you know? But my mom was very, very smart about that. And she got me thinking about losing faith. And she got me thinking about, okay, but maybe it's okay to still follow through and do the right thing. And my mom is going back and forth and like, well, he had help too. Didn't his friend come in at the end? I'm like, well, yeah, but he still did the right thing. And my mom and I are arguing. And I look at my mom and I'm just like, well, what about all of those altar boys I keep hearing about, Mom? And my mom looks at me and my mom just goes, well, most of that happened so long ago, I don't know why they have to keep talking about it. To which I replied, well, Jesus died 2,000 years ago and you can't see the shit. So the fact that my mom and my dad are taking my little brother and I to see The Empire Strikes Back means she was trying. Means that she was making an effort, that she was the adult and she wanted to see her boys happy, even if that meant maybe that could be losing us. And I look back at that moment and I truly can see that that is where my life took a turn. I think it was the last innocent day I had in childhood. 2 years later, I attempted suicide. And when people ask me about depression, I always struggle to explain that. They want a logical answer, and I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain it poetically. I don't know how to explain it clinically. I just know that I felt this pressure and this weight, and I felt like everything was overwhelming to me. And maybe the way that you can picture it is think of a fish tank with crystal clear water in it. And someone comes along with an eyedropper and just puts in a little bit of ink. And that ink will start to spread, but you know, just a little bit of ink, it'll dilute. But they put in more ink, it takes longer to dilute. That's sadness. You come in with a bucket of ink and you pour that into the clear water and it just goes pitch black and cold and you can't see anything. That's depression. My parents didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me. I ended up being sent to a place called Madden Mental Health Center outside of Chicago. And it was a place that treated juvenile mental health crises. It's supposed to be short-term. And I'm going to be honest with you, this story does not even focus on all that time that I spent there. I ended up being in there for 5 months. And yes, I saw some things. I experienced some things. I will also tell you, the staff never did anything cruel. The staff didn't torture us in any way, but they just babysat us. There was very little therapy. Most of what we did was watch TV. That's mostly what we did. And every once in a while, like once a week, something would happen that to this day, I still remember. I remember a young girl who must have been 14 or 15, slitting her wrists from her wrist all the way back to this part of her arm, and just feeling a physical sensation of blood hitting the floor. I remember another young man who was my roommate waking me up in the middle of the night completely naked masturbating. I remember a guy coming in who looked like he he must have been 16, probably a classic jock. And he was so argumentative, and he was just so forceful with everyone, and everything was a fight. And then they gave him something, and he was a completely different person. And one day I'm standing there, and we would listen to the radio a lot, and I'm standing in the day room, and there's a Phil Collins song that was popular at the time called I Don't Care Anymore. And there's a part in that song where Phil Collins sings, I don't care what you say anymore. I don't care. I'll be okay by myself. And I remember thinking, I am not crazy. I don't belong in this place. If I stay in this place, I will go crazy. And here's the thing. If you're 13 and it's Illinois and you're in a mental health facility for juveniles, you do not have much recourse to get out. My best option was for my parents to take me back, to take me home. They did not feel I was ready for that. The other option that was presented to me when I kept asking was I could petition the mental health court to be let go. So of course that's what I did. There was a lot of paperwork. I was assigned a court-appointed attorney who was maybe 7, 8 years older than me at the time. It felt like this was his first thing. And I remember going to meet him, and I was in just like a t-shirt and pants that were barely holding up, and he's in a tie that looks like his mother had given it to him for First Communion or something. You know, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, why do you want to do this? Like, well, I'm not crazy. He's just like, that's exactly what you shouldn't say. Like, well, what should I say to get out of a place that's for crazy people? He goes, first of all, stop saying crazy, okay? Nobody is going to take you seriously. You have to look at this judge, and you got to tell him, listen, I do not feel that this is the appropriate setting for me. And I told him I would never say something like that. And he goes, well, listen, you're going to be in court. You have to speak court. Like, what would you really say to the judge if you wanted to leave right now? And I said, well, I'd probably say the force is strong with me and I'll do fine in the world. And there's a pause, and he looks at me and he goes, are you sure you're not crazy? Like, I swear to you, I am not crazy. To go to court, I had to drive all the way into they drove me all the way into Chicago, and it's a mental health court for juveniles. And we're on like the 20th floor of some massive Justice Department building. And I remember before I walked in, the bailiff turned to my attorney and I and said, listen, there is a class of mostly freshman college girls taking psychology. They're going to be observing. Is that okay? No! This is like my greatest fear. Like, there's going to be all of these college girls observing me. I can barely have a conversation with myself in the mirror, you know? But again, it's like, yeah, whatever, right? Whatever. And the attorney tells me right before he goes in, he goes, remember, the judge is going to ask you very specific questions. Just be honest about the questions. And then as I start to turn away, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he just goes, hey, may the force be with you. I walk in and, man, it is like every TV show I've ever seen. It's a courtroom, right? And I walk past all of the girls just burning with shame, right? Trying not to make eye contact. And I go to the table I'm supposed to sit at, and the judge is where he's supposed to be, and the giant wooden box is up there, and I can see that the room is worn, and I can smell that it's been cleaned and polished 100 times over. And what surprises me is that on the other side are my mom and my dad with their attorney. And I knew that they were going to be there. I knew that this was part of the process, but it still surprised me. And I looked over at my parents, and they didn't make eye contact, as I believe they were instructed to do, and I just turned and looked straight ahead, and when the judge came in, we stood up. There was a lot of procedural stuff. I don't quite remember it. And the judge said, young man, you realize that you are petitioning this court to get out of a mental health facility. Do you have means to take care of yourself? No. What would you do if you were released today? I don't know. Do you feel that you are a danger to yourself and others? No, I do not. Why did you come to Madden Mental Health? And I can feel everybody take a deep breath, because that's the question, right? That's the question. Am I emotionally intelligent enough to honestly answer? Like, I was depressed. Am I going to try to bullshit my way and give some crazy answer? And I just looked at the judge and I said, I just hurt, Your Honor. I just feel a lot, maybe more than other kids my age, and it just took me a moment to figure out that that's okay. And the judge shook his head. He looked down at a whole bunch of files, and he said, okay. And then he looked over at my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Closen. Do you feel that your son is ready to return home? And my mom looked up at the judge and just said, I don't think he's ready, Your Honor. And as much as I knew that was probably true, it hurt to hear. And I snuck a quick glance over at my father, and I could see that there was absolutely no crow's feet. And that hurt a little bit more too. And there was a lot of questions, a lot of back and forth, and the judge finally said, okay, I'm going to have to review this matter. We're going to have you undergo some tests. I'm not going to make a ruling today. We're going to have to schedule something for a few weeks. My parents left. We waited for them to leave. I left, and my attorney said to me before we left, I haven't been doing this that long, but this is extremely rare that no judgment was made today. I didn't know what to read into that. 2 weeks later, we're there, our Madden Mental Health, we're there, and we're doing what we always do. It's an hour before dinner, so we're watching Three's Company reruns on the TV, and I'm invested in it. It's a really different episode. It's one where Jack overhears something and misinterprets it, and it gets crazy. And that's when they tell me, Joe, it's your lawyer, and I'm like, oh, how's it gonna end? Lawyer tells me we have another date. Same process happens again. We drive on out there. This time, there's nobody watching, no college of girls taking psychology classes. It's just me and my parents on both sides of the court. And the judge goes, okay, we've reviewed a lot of the tests that were performed on you. I've talked to the psychologists. I've talked to some of the staff. I want to hear more from your parents. And my parents, they're trying, I know, but they're more worried that the court is going to find them bad parents, which is still going to leave me in this predicament. How do you prove you are not crazy? How do you prove that even though you're 13, you don't need help? How do you prove to a system that is just easier to run if it continues to just give you Three's Company episodes as therapy? How do you do that? The judge looks back at me and he goes, young man, I want you to be very certain about this. Because if we find that you do not need help and we let you back into society, are we doing something good for you? Are we doing something bad for society? What do you think is the best thing for you? Nobody had asked me that question. And again, I could feel unto me. But if Illinois says this child is sane and my parents don't take me back, they don't know what to do with me. It was catch-22 before I knew what catch-22 really was. I'm back at Madden Mental Health. it's an hour before dinner, and we're watching Three's Company. And it's another wacky episode where Jack misunderstands something that he hears and tries to figure it out. And just before we get the solution to the problem, Joe, you've got a phone call. Oh. It's my sister, my older sister, Teresa. Teresa had been sent away to boarding school a couple times with my parents. She was the original black sheep in the family. My sister was seeing everything that was going on. She was kicked out of the house because she got pregnant at 16, and my extremely Roman Catholic mother could not have a pregnant child in the house. So she had her own apartment. And she was seeing everything that was going on, and my sister was smart. She looked into it, and she realized, I'm family. I could assume responsibility for you. And Teresa said, you're going to come live with me. You're going to get out of there. It's a done deal. Monday, I'm coming. I'm picking you up. I got to tell you, I've not thought about some of this stuff in years. And she did. She came and she picked me up. And I had just a little tiny cardboard box of all my worldly possessions. All my clothes fit into that. I had some journals. We get in the car and we drive. It was a week later when I'm at my sister's apartment and I'm squared away, I'm sleeping on the couch. Summertime, I'm riding my bicycle a lot. I'm a kid. I'm a 13-year-old normal kid. Nobody knows my history. Nobody knows my past. I get to decide my future. And as I'm riding around, I realize I don't know what the state of Illinois decided. To this day, I don't know if Illinois thinks I was crazy. Hopefully they won't show up tonight and let me know. Thank you very much for listening.
Joe Closing. Santa Sofia!